Okay. So I'm going to do a video response here. This is an off-the-cuff one to Steve Shives and his video. How long are we going to keep arguing about this? And this is almost like a kind of two-parter. The first part is a more considered video. It's going to take more editing. And this is all a bit fucking Quentin Tarantino, that, because I've recorded that an hour or so ago. I finished recording that. But you're going to see this first because this will take less editing. So I'm going to do this in the style that people do videos now, where you play a bit and respond and play a bit and respond. Okay, see how that pans out. What I'm not going to do is this thing, because it pisses me off. You see a lot of it now, where you play about 5 seconds. Fucking hell, the person's hardly got a word out their mouth and they're getting paused and responded to. Right? They've not even got a quarter of the way through the point that they wanted to make, and it's being deconstructed. I'm going to try not to do that, and I'm going to try and give chunks, sensible chunks, where a point has been started and finished, and at that point I will respond. I know it's old school. I know it probably doesn't make for good viewing, but that's the way I'm going to do it, because it just feels a little bit more intellectually the right way of doing things. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is that I'm not going to pretend that I've not watched this video before, right? Because that's something. How many times do you fucking see that? I can't believe I'm ranting. I've not even started the fucking video. But how many times do you see that now? It's like the video's done as if it's discussed, like, oh, I wonder what this person will say next. And you think, you know what they say next. You've watched the video. Or the other alternative is this. They may have hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and they'll stand there and say, oh yeah, I've not watched this video yet, so I'm just going to respond to it live. Either one of two things is true, right? Either you're full of shit and you have watched it before, and that you're just pretending that this is the first time that you've watched it, or you haven't watched it before, in which case you fucking should have done, you lazy bastard. Because if one, how do you know it's worth responding? Do you respond to 24 videos live until you finally find one that was worth responding to? And you can't do it justice, can you, without at least watching it once? If you're such a lazy cunt, you can't even watch it once before responding, then there's a bit of an issue. Anyway, look, maybe I should just get on and respond to Steve. Okay, so let's start off. Okay, Steve. And let me just say, I've been headphone shamed by you bastards. I wore these for the hangout I did with Philip Moriarty before he decided to leave YouTube. I got headphone shamed for having these ridiculously large headphones. So what I've had to do is I've had to turn the volume up really, really high, and I'm just going to leave them on the top because of you headphone shaming bastards. Right, here we go. Okay, Steve Shives. Okay.
Do all ideas deserve a fair hearing? Sure, but what about ideas who have had their fair hearing and have been widely discredited and rejected?
Yeah, well, what about those ideas? Do you know, I kind of wonder where Steve mentally is with this, right? That it's like, I'm just trying to imagine I'm Steve Shives. Does he sit there and think, how lucky I am to live in this time and this place, the first recorded location in the entirety of recorded human history where people such as I exist, who are apparently uniquely placed to objectively decide which arguments still require further discussion and which can be dismissed for all time now. Because really, you know, it kind of reminds me this of the kind of, the kind of Christian end times, is that eschatological thought, something like that. This kind of Christian thing on the second coming of Jesus. And these Christians who are absolutely fucking convinced that Jesus, that they've seen the tidings, right? They've seen the eyes. They know that Jesus is going to appear in the next fucking 10 minutes, or at least within their lifetime, because, hey, People are dying. There's a war going on somewhere in the world. All the signs are there. There's a war, and people are dying from too much saturated fat, right? It's all the kind of stuff that's all been predicted. Things are going to start going wrong, okay? And that's what's happening. So this is predicted, the second coming of Jesus. Seemingly, they're just not fazed by the fact that every fucking generation that's come before them for 2,000 years have thought the same thing, and every single fucking one of them has been wrong. But that just doesn't seem to affect them one single bit. They're still entirely convinced, and that is what I get from this kind of perspective here. It's this like kind of absolute certitude that he's at the exact time and place rather than anybody else to start making these assertions.
Recent punching of white supremacist Richard Spencer and protesters shutting down scheduled appearances by racist, misogynist, professional internet troll Milo Yiannopoulos, I've heard many people arguing that the likes of Spencer and Yiannopoulos should be allowed to have their say, that their voices ought to be heard, so that if their claims are false or their rhetoric is harmful, we can respond in kind.
Okay, so, this reminds me of something I made a video on a couple of times before, though, Quilliam, some of the people from Quilliam and the right to debate in the UK, which exactly take the point that he takes issue with here, but with regard to Islamic extremists, which is that actually you're much better off from hearing them, perhaps in a debate format, but it's much more important not to push these ideas underground. That actually the fact that you think these ideas have so little value and are potentially dangerous, two things that Steve would say about people like Richard Spencer, is exactly why you don't suppress them. Suppressing them is dangerous. And after all, I got on my high horse a minute ago, didn't I, about, Steve thinking is at that perfect place and time to be able to decide, to be able to decree almost divinely, right, which arguments have been rebutted for all time. But let's be honest, right? If I was to just take you into confidence, I would say that as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to the claims made by the Abrahamic faiths of Christianity, Judaism, Islam, as far as I'm concerned, I'm convinced that they're all full of shit. And with regard to the central claims that they make, there's nothing really to be gained philosophically or scientifically from discussing them anymore, okay? But I'm not gonna espouse that position, because I full well know that it wouldn't do us any good to start suppressing that. We still need to have those discussions that relate to those religions, whether I like it or not, whether I'm personally satisfied that they've been falsified or otherwise. I don't see how Steve can't see that.
With the truth, or with better ideas. The people making these arguments are, for the most part, good, well-intentioned people. Many of them are just as disgusted by Yiannopoulos and Spencer as I am. They're motivated by their dedication to free and open discourse, to the principle that no idea should be suppressed.
And also motivated by the fact that the boot could well be on the other foot, Steve. That it's not that they're not uniquely privileged in terms of knowing what arguments are right and what arguments are wrong. And even if they were uniquely privileged, not everybody else regards them. The opposition don't say, well, shit, Steve Shives is uniquely privileged to know that my arguments are full of shit, because they think you're full of shit. They think your arguments have been falsified, Steve, and some of them would happily do the same for you. That's what I can't get my head around.
And in principle, that's a fine notion, particularly when we're talking about the role the government plays in regulating speech. Do we want the state stepping in and saying that there are certain things we just can't say, no matter how vile those things might be? No, I don't think most of us would want that. But does that mean that every propagator of every theory and ideology is entitled to a platform and an audience? No, of course not.
Okay, so this was the point when I watched this the first time through, which I thought, I've got to say something about this, because this doesn't make sense. You're saying that the government isn't going to get to decide, right? So that's great. The government doesn't get to decide. So we're talking about people like Yiannopoulos, who are speaking on campuses, right? So who is going to get to decide, Steve? This is what I don't understand. Who is going to get to decide? Surely the students perhaps should get to decide. If a group of students want to invite a speaker, then they ought to be able to invite a speaker. After all, this idea that people like Yiannopoulos are entitled, as far as I'm aware, he isn't walking on university campuses going, right, you fucking wankers, give me a hall, give me a fucking microphone, you've got 10 fucking minutes, or I'm burning the place down. He has been invited to speak by who? Invited to speak by students. So I don't get it. If you're saying it isn't the government, which is great, I agree with you, the government shouldn't do this. But when we're talking about university campuses, if there are a group of students who want to hear it, and if you're saying, well, that doesn't matter, it doesn't matter that students want to hear it, well, who does? What are you saying? Is there some kind of elitism here? Where what we're saying is, right, the government won't decide, and it won't be students generally, it'll be a certain group of students, just a certain group of students who tend to be aligned with me, and they'll be the ones that get to decide on behalf of all the students, because otherwise, it seems to me that you're speaking from a very, very privileged position here, Steve. And I'm not going to say check your privilege, but I really, really want to.
And since when has that ever been the case? We ignore people promoting what we have come to regard as bad ideas all the time. It happens in science, it happens in politics, it happens in our everyday lives. There comes a point where the argument is over, where continued discourse on the matter would be of no use to anyone other than the most stubborn, die-hard supporters of a roundly rejected position.
The only time when discourse is no longer of value is when two criteria are met, Steve. The first is that either scientifically or philosophically there is nothing left. No point revisiting that well. And the second point is when that idea has become almost universally unpopular, where almost everybody agrees with you. So something like flat earth theory would be an example. But creationism is still worth talking about because there's still a huge number of people who are creationists. For example, you might think that religion is full of shit, but you still have those fucking discussions on your channel. You churn out video after video after video against positions that you regard as full of shit. So why are you doing that? You're doing that because you accept in that context that if a sufficient number of people have that position, it doesn't matter what the full of shittedness quotient is of that argument, you still have to keep going back to that well because people believe it. How come when instead it's about political positions that you have no time for, a different set of criteria suddenly apply? I just don't get that one.
The thing is, it's not just better ideas that defeat bad ideas. My friend Eli Bosnick made this point on Twitter a few days ago. I'm saying he's my friend, but we don't really know each other that well. I like him, I think he likes me, so I'm saying he's my friend. And if Eli has a problem with that, he can come find me and I'll take care of his problem for him. How about that? Actually, no, forget that last bit. Eli and I have only met in person once and we're about the same size and I can't fight like at all. So if he can handle himself even a little bit, that might go really badly for me. My casual acquaintance Eli Bosnick.
Can I just say, this isn't really related to this, but if you haven't blocked him on Twitter, Steve, then he probably classes as one of your friends. I still think, even then, you probably couldn't fill a fucking telephone box with your friends if we're just going on people that you haven't blocked on Twitter. Anyway, that's another subject.
Made this point on Twitter a few days ago. Refuting bad ideas with good ideas is important, but so is removing bad ideas from the discourse. And when we refuse to do that, when we continue to engage with people pushing arguments that have already been refuted, we treat their bad ideas as though they were legitimate.
But can you not see what a position of absolute privilege you are speaking from here, Steve? Look, you are an atheist. And you like to be able to make your arguments in favour of against religion, don't you? And I'd say you're an anti-theist as well, same as I am. So you like to be able to advocate those arguments. And yet there are people in the United States where you live, but then there are whole nations around the world. There are nations like Saudi Arabia, Steve, who a couple of years ago passed some new legislation taking an even more hardline stance on atheism than they had before. And their rationale is exactly the rationale they're using now. Why should we allow people to be atheists? We all know it's a heap of shit. We all know that position, the atheist position, has been falsified. We all know you'd have to be a total fucking idiot not to believe in a personal God. So why should we keep having those discussions, Steve? When I say you speak from a position of privilege, it's because you're speaking from a position where your understanding is that it will be your people that are getting to decide, right, which subjects we can stop talking about. And that's great, isn't it, Steve? That's great while ever you're in the ascendancy. But the boot might be on the other foot, my friend, at some point. And it might be the things that you hold true and dear that you'd fucking fight tooth and nail over. And it might somebody else saying, no, I'm sorry, this trans issue, right, we've already decided on that, so we're not going to have any speakers speaking on that at universities anymore because we've already decided. We're not going to have pro-life people pro-choice people speaking on the abortion issue at universities anymore because we've already decided that life is sacred from the moment of conception. We've had the argument, we've heard all the arguments before, so we don't need any of these pro-choice people to speak anymore. Can you not see the danger in what you're saying? It sounds safe, it sounds the right thing to do because the privileged position you're in at the moment, but it's such a fucking dangerous thing to suggest, Steve.
There's a name for this, the balance fallacy. It's what happens when people see their ideas treated as though they have merit or might have merit when we already know that they don't have merit.
And that's just a risk that you've got to take. I accept that. It does promote ideas. I accept that. You want to argue with creationists, it gives them a little bit of credence because you're arguing with them. It does. That is the price that you pay, Steve. But if you're not willing to pay that price, it's going to come back and nip you in the arse. I assure you of that.
The balance fallacy is the only hope the likes of Spencer and Yiannopoulos have for continuing to earn a living disseminating their long ago discredited ideas.
No. The biggest chance that they have is people like you. If you start to suppress what they have to say will benefit from that. You need to defeat them. If you want a sensible proposal for campuses, right, it's not to start smashing windows and punching people in the face and spraying them in the face, right, once they've been invited. It's to have a system in place, such as the right to debate, say, which is that if you have people with very, very contentious opinions, the university, the student bodies themselves that are inviting them, right, will have to do it in some kind of debate format where they can't speak unopposed. Now, there's a quid pro quo to that, which is that you might want to say something sometime unopposed, and you'll have to say it in a debate format as well. But that's maybe the most sensible thing that you can do. As it is, it's not like what you're suggesting is going to suck away their power. It's going to add to their power.
That's why they lean so hard on their warped, self-serving caricature of free speech, which in their interpretation includes not only the right to speak, but also the right to a microphone and an audience.
Yeah, well, this goes back to what I say. What the fuck are you talking about? Honestly, Steve, what the fuck are you talking about? A right to a microphone and an audience. Look, let's say a university student body went fucking mad, right, and invited me. Okay, they were that fucking desperate to get somebody that invited me, right, and said, please turn up, right, we'll pay your expenses, we've got a hall, we've got some people want to come and fucking listen to you, you can have a meal, we'll pay for a meal while you're there, we'll give you accommodation for your night, and I turn up, and when I turn up, there's a bunch of people, fucking smoke coming out their fucking nostrils who'd rip my fucking head off, right, for turning up to speak there. Is that my privilege? Am I demanding a microphone? Am I demanding a fucking lecture hall? I've been invited, Steve. I've been invited to speak. Why is this a demand? Which one of these people is demanding to speak at universities? Because all I see is people being invited, and when they turn up there, people are not just launching a legitimate protest as they're entitled to do, but they're trying to do whatever it takes to make sure that that speech doesn't actually go ahead, or if it does go ahead, they just disrupt it to a point whereas it might as well not have happened in the first place. And I tell you what, Steve, if I was at university now, I couldn't give a fuck what positions are the right positions or what positions are the wrong positions. I'd be happily get involved in a movement that took notice of who the disruptive groups were, right? And I would happily just disrupt anything that they tried to organise, just to put the fucking shoe on the other foot and show them what a fucking wrong-headed tactic that they were involved in.
But that's not how it works. Refuting bad ideas with good ideas is necessary, but that's just step one. Step two is leaving behind the bad ideas and the people who continue to cling to them and demand our attention.
Yeah, I mean, again, I absolutely agree with that. Leaving behind the bad ideas is the good thing to do. But you don't get to decide that, Steve. I'm afraid you've got to do two processes. One process is a process you're already engaged in, which is to try and make the scientific and the philosophical arguments or the political arguments to make the case. Now, I might not always agree with the argument you make, but I roundly applaud you for doing so, sometimes in the face of a lot of criticism. But the second point that you have to do is that you have to win people over legitimately. Right? And let's be honest, I'm not actually looking over the Atlantic Ocean. I'm looking at my curtains at the moment. But when I look at, if I was to look over the Atlantic Ocean at the United States, what I'm seeing is a substantial number of people still who hold these philosophies that you find so abhorrent. They've just voted Donald Trump as the fucking president. Right? And according to you yourself, he epitomizes, he embodies all these different things. So you haven't done stage two, have you? So what right have you got to say, no, you people can't have your views. You should be silenced. Not by the state, but just not given any platform. That's a fucking, you say, they may not have said it yet. You should just have a fucking soapbox to speak from. And that is the only venue that you should have, because I've decided, I, Steve Shives, will it, that we've won the argument now and you've got nothing that's worth hearing.
Do they have the right to continue to speak in support of their bad ideas? Sure they do. Do they have the right to a platform to better enable them to disseminate those ideas? Absolutely not.
No, they don't have a right to a platform. You don't have a fucking right to a platform. No group that's ever invited to a university has a right to a platform prior to them being invited. And that could be LGBT rights, it could be pro-choice on abortion, it could be women's rights, it could be anything. None of them have the right to a platform. But once they've been invited by a group within the university, then I think, yes, they do have a right to that platform. Yeah, I do. And I think that the university and the authorities and the police should take every step to make sure that that is upheld. And these disruptive cunts that would try and then stop them through illegitimate means from having that platform, not through just protesting, but through disruptive measures, they need to be opposed and repelled. The strongest means necessary.
Let them speak, but let it be from atop an apple crate on a street corner.
Okay, so I said soapbox. Apple fucking crate. Apple schmapples, Steve.
Not on a stage at a university or in front of a radio microphone or a television camera. We've heard what they have to say.
And you don't agree with it. So that's it. It's a fucking done deal, isn't it? Absolutely. That's bizarre.
Now it's time to stop indulging them so the rest of us can move forward.
Okay, well, you're not doing a very good job. All I can say is, Steve, you're doing a pretty fucking shit job of it. You've gone from Barack Obama to Donald fucking Trump. So I don't really think it's kind of panning out, this idea, is it, of opposing by stifling. I actually think you need to rethink this, right? And rethink it in terms of the goals that you yourself are trying to promote, but even more, just minded of the fact that there may come a point in the future where the boot is resolutely on the other foot, Steve, just as it has been for the positions that you uphold through most of recorded history. And if that boot had been held down as firmly as you would be holding it down, I don't think some of the things that you hold so dear would even have had a chance to surface in the first place? I don't know how, because you're not a stupid man, right? You're an intelligent guy. I don't know how you cannot see the danger in the things that you say. It's like so myopic, it's so blinkered in terms of what you say. I just don't know what to say. Okay, well, that's it. That's been my fucking video experiment of a live, off-the-cuff response. Okay, thanks for watching. That'll do.